What qualifies a spell as dark magic? The divide between regular magic and dark magic, the dark arts, in the magical world is pretty stark. For children, it's not often that the dark arts are taught at their schools, with Durmstrang being the only real exception, and even for adults, if you want to get your hands on some magical artifacts or materials related to the dark arts, you're sequestered all the way away from Diagon Alley and Nocturne Alley, the crooked and narrow streets that dark arts are bandied about. But what really separates the dark arts from regular spells? Are dark spells just spells that are scary? Today, we discuss. At first glance, it may seem like dark spells are just more dramatic versions of regular spells. Take Defendo, for example. Translated from Latin, the incantation means to split, cleave, or open. This spell is used to cut something. Pretty pedestrian. In fact, the spell was invented by a witch by the name of Delphina Crimp in the 15th century to aid in fabric cutting, previous spells often fraying or burning her textiles. Granted, it seems that the use of this spell is what nearly got her killed by competing Muggle tailors who discovered she was a witch, but I digress. Though one final note is that she saves herself by pretending to need to scratch a mole on her face, so they momentarily untie her only for her to full-on Fooly Cooly style pull the wand out of the mole in her face. It wasn't a mole after all, it was the butt of her wand. Bet they didn't see that one coming. But then you have the Sectum Sempra spell, invented by none other than Severus Snape. Loosely translated from Latin, sectum kinda means to cut, and semper translates to always. Moment of silence for that little coinky dinkish. One more aside on that note, did you guys ever notice how Snape's last words are "look at me" to Harry? I always assumed he had one last thing to say to him but passed before he could get the words out, but it recently hit me that it's actually because Harry famously has Lily's eyes. He tells Harry to look at him because he wants the last thing he sees to be Lily's eyes. God, Snape is such a creep, but that gets me every time. What I'm getting at is that the spells more or less do the same thing, with the only real difference seeming to be whatever Sectum Sempra cuts off completely cannot be mended. Prime example being George's ear in the Battle of Seven Potters, when Snape slips and catches the Weasley twin. So is that the only difference between the two spells? Well, not exactly. I would say that Sectum Sempra doesn't have any inherent ill intent behind it, but as Snape as the inventor literally writes "for enemies" next to the incantation in his potions textbook after inventing it, differentiating factors for dark spells number one does seem to be malicious design. I think the inability to fully restore separated pieces cut by Sectum Sempra isn't something we can glaze over though. The only reason they can't be mended may seem like it's just due to the inclusion of the Latin word for always, but if we look at other effects of dark magic, difficulty or the straight up inability to heal wounds caused by the dark arts is definitely a common thread. An easy example is that of Bill Weasley's facial scarring from his fight with the werewolf Fenrir Greyback. While the books do not outright call werewolfery dark, yes, that is apparently the proper Wizarding World term for lycanthropy, according to Arsenius Jigger, author of the Essential Defense Against the Dark Arts textbook. It is a subject studied in Defense Against the Dark Arts classes, and also seems to be mostly discussed in books about the dark arts, on top of Lupin calling Bill's wounds cursed wounds, unlikely to ever fully heal, so safe bet, I think. It's also worth mentioning the bite Mr. Weasley suffers from the Maledictus Nagini. When visited in St. Mungo's, Mr. Weasley is heavily bandaged and explains that he cannot remove the bandages due to excessive bleeding every time it is attempted. He states that something about the venom seems to keep wounds open. Later, when Mr. Weasley returns home fully cured, Mrs. Weasley states that healer Smethwick found an antidote for whatever was in the venom and now he's fine. This makes it sound as though the snake venom itself was the culprit, nothing to do with dark magic. We do not, after all, have any other examples of maledictuses in the story, so we cannot know if the bites of other animal forms of maledictuses would cause these sort of cursed wounds, but we do at least know that the maledictus condition results from a blood curse, curse being the operative word, that makes the condition a result of dark magic. It's a bit of personal headcanon for me that Healer Smethwick likely stumbled across the Vulnera Senentur spell that Snape uses to heal Malfoy's Sectum Semper wounds, but we will likely never know. A final possible example of dark magic apparently causing damage that is difficult or impossible to heal is, quite sadly, Neville's parents. Frank and Alice Longbottom were struck repeatedly by the incredibly dark Cruciatus curse at the hands of Bellatrix Lestrange. It's possible that what drove them mad was the extended horrific pain from the curse, but I do think it's likely that some inherent aspect of the dark spell made their madness permanent. With these examples in mind, I think it's safe to say that dark magic often leaves victims with permanent or difficult to repair spell damage, but it is not necessarily a primary trait. I think our best answer may lie in the taxonomic classification of charms. According to the Standard Book of Spells, Grade 1, jinxes, hexes, and curses are known as dark charms. Jinxes are the least offensive versions of dark charms, mostly causing irritating but amusing effects. Hexes cause moderate suffering, while curses cause immense suffering to the victim. And sometimes the best answer is the easiest. Spells are considered dark if they cause undesirable effects on the victim. I think in general, if you're casting a spell at someone and it feels right to use the word victim rather than target or recipient, you're probably talking about some dark art stuff there. So there you have it. If there are any other questions you have about the dark arts related to what potions or what magical beasts might qualify under the dark arts umbrella, let me know in the comments alongside any other burning Wizarding World questions. Thanks for everyone for watching, and have a magical day.